Former Senator of Maine George Mitchell was appointed to investigate whether players of the MLB used illegal drugs before games. But little did he know that his efforts towards this investigation would become the most astonishing sports story of the decade. Because after publishing his report, it became clear that not only baseball stars were part of drug consumption,
each of the 30 clubs has had players who have been involved with such substances at some time in their careers.
some of them even wrote checks to make payments for their favorite drugs, while others purchased substances that couldn't be detected through tests. So let me ask you this, why would baseball stars do such a thing? And why did the Major League Baseball drug policy fail to catch them? There was also a lot of criticism when this report was published in 2007. As Mitchell was the director of the Boston Red Sox, no prime Red Sox player was named in the report. So what actually lies behind the incredible achievements of these champions? To understand the real picture of this report, let me take you back to the year 2001.
Nobody out. Deep to right field!
When Barry Bonds scored his incredible 500th home run. This record became one of the most iconic moments in baseball history. People who were present at this game can never forget how amazing it felt to be there. However, with Bonds celebrating in front of millions of people, something suspicious was working in the background that was waiting to steal his newly established reputation.
Don't you see a difference between someone taking a drug for pleasure and someone taking a drug so that they can cheat?
Yes, I do, and I described that in my report.
You see, a few months after this match, US Drug Enforcement Administration agents received a piece of critical information from an anonymous person. The information talked about how Greg Anderson, Barry Bonds' personal trainer, was secretly distributing steroids to famous players like Jason Giambi, Gary Sheffield, and of course, Barry Bonds was one of his favorite clients. So at first, the federal agents considered this information as an attempt to harm Bonds' reputation, but when they tapped Anderson's call with Bonds, they were baffled to hear the conversation. In the recording, Anderson was heard telling Bonds about a steroid called the Cream, which couldn't be detected in drug tests. He said, "The whole thing is, everything that I have been doing at this point, it's all undetectable. See, the stuff I have, we created it, and you can't buy it anywhere else, can't get it anywhere else, but you can take it the day of the test, pee, and it comes up perfect." Now, as a result of this conversation, in September 2003, the federal agents raided Anderson's Burlingame home in California and found exactly what they were looking for. Inside the home, they found containers of suspected steroids, like the Clear, which was never marketed for medical use. They then discovered human growth hormone, $60,000 cash, and calendars that clearly described the daily doses of steroids for elite players. As Anderson pleaded guilty in 2005, this convinced the Commissioner of Baseball, Bud Selig, to launch an official investigation into MLB players. On top of that, within 12 months of Anderson pleading guilty, one of the most controversial books of the 21st century was published. It was called Game of Shadows, in which two investigative reporters from the San Francisco Chronicle conducted 200 interviews and found that elite players were 100% consuming steroids. Of course, it was the best-selling book because controversial books like that always find a way to make the maximum profit. This book, coupled with Anderson's case, resulted in a massive debate in the US Congress. The effectiveness of MLB's drug policies was the only topic Congress members were discussing.
Finally, Senator Mitchell recommends increasing independence and transparency of the program, as well as conducting year-round unannounced testing.
So on March 30, 2006, right after the week when this book was published, George Mitchell was finally appointed to lead the MLB investigation.
Here's the situation. It's a problem. How do you solve it?
Now, what Mitchell was about to witness was nothing in front of Anderson's conviction because Anderson's case was just the tip of the iceberg. You see, the real boss was hiding somewhere in the MLB. But to identify him was not an easy task. When Mitchell began his investigation, the MLB Players Association, instead of supporting Mitchell, advised all players to refrain from any cooperation. And this advice was made in this clear note by the association. Check this out. To all players, any information gathered by Senator Mitchell in player interviews is not legally privileged. What this means is that while Senator Mitchell pledges in his memo that he will honor any player request for confidentiality, in his report he does not pledge because he cannot pledge that any information you provide will actually remain confidential and not be disclosed without your consent. For example, Senator Mitchell cannot promise that information you disclose will not be given to a federal or state prosecutor. Now, this advice was issued by Donald Fear, who was the executive director of this association, and Michael Weiner, who was the general counsel. As this advice demotivated the players to share the truth, luckily the enforcement agents managed to catch the actual suspect in the background. And you're wondering, who might that be? Well, he is Kirk Radomski, a former bat boy and clubhouse employee for the New York Mets. So when his house was raided, the agents found Radomski's address book and these receipts of payments from Major League Baseball players. Payments for what? Well, I'm glad you asked. MLB players made payments for performance-enhancing steroids that Radomski happily distributed at their wish. He did not distribute these steroids for a month or a year, but for almost a decade, from 1995 until 2005. For example, David Segui made a payment in the 1990s through a check of $1,800 for steroids that reduced joint pain. Larry R. Biggie made a $1,200 payment for human growth hormone. He met Radomski through David in 2003. There was also Jason Grimsley, who made a $3,200 payment, and he met Radomski when he was pitching for the Yankees in the year 2000. And Roger Clemens, who used his personal trainer Brian McNamee as a sub-distributor from Radomski. This information was revealed after Radomski decided to cooperate with Mitchell in return for receiving a lower sentence. But you might be wondering how these well-known players managed to get their hands on steroids without getting caught. Well, thanks to Radomski's confession, that helped us get an inside picture of how and where this all happened. As Radomski was already familiar with the MLB players, they were astonished to notice his enormous transformation when he arrived at the 1993 spring training. Soon, players began asking him about his diet, to which Radomski responded that he uses steroids as part of his training. However, Radomski was surprised to notice when MLB players started asking him about a water-based anabolic steroid called Winstrol, a drug that not only clears the body faster but also is less likely to get detected through tests. This concludes our first doubt on how they escaped the drug test.
Let me be clear, I have never taken steroids or HGH.
Let me take you back to the 1998 season when Clemens won the pitching Triple Crown and Cy Young Award. This award is given to the best pitchers in MLB, and the reason behind this was the steroid Winstrol. In the report, Radomski described that throughout the 1998 season, Clemens was injected with Winstrol by McNamee at his apartment Skydome, and this incredible performance of Clemens helped him trade to the New York Yankees.
I'm not saying Senator Mitchell's report is entirely wrong. I am saying Brian McNamee's statements about me are wrong. Let me be clear, I have never taken steroids or HGH.
After Mitchell published this 409-page report in 2007, it also described how elite players taking such steroids harm the population on a larger scale. For example, in August 1998, when the news was published about Mark McGwire consuming the steroid androstenedione, the National Institute on Drug Abuse reported that around 8% of male high school senior athletes consumed the same drug. Although this steroid use was legal at the time, a tenfold increase in sales of this supplement also has side effects like heart disease. In total, Mitchell found 89 MLB players to have consumed steroids. However, some of them confessed, while others were still not ready to accept the truth. Larry Biggie admitted to purchasing drugs from Radomski, while Clemens filed a defamation suit. And Barry Bonds was sentenced to 30 days of house arrest, 2 years of probation, and 250 hours of community service. The report also convinced then President George W. Bush to say, "We can jump to this conclusion, that steroids have sullied the game." Nevertheless, a serious question also points towards MLB's weak drug policy. Instead of conducting random drug tests, their policy only talked about testing for drug abuse when the panel members have sufficient evidence against the player. Moreover, the level of punishment was not enough to deter players from consuming steroids. Specifically speaking, before the Mitchell report, MLB provided a 30-day suspension of the player if he used banned drugs for the first time. For the second time, he is given a 90-day suspension, and for the third, a 1-year suspension. Surprisingly, it was only after the Mitchell report that MLB started random drug testing and increased the punishment level. As of today, if a player consumes banned drugs for the first time, he gets suspended from 80 games. For the second time, he is banned for a full season, and for the third, there is a lifetime suspension. But if this action had been taken earlier, then players would have stayed miles away from drugs. So, what are your views about players using steroids in the game? Tell us in the comment section below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, or I'll steal your shoes.